Hey folks, Tyler Wagster with Wagster Crop Insurance. I've been speaking with a lot of farmers over the last week, and in certain counties, most are struggling to find windows to plant, especially with the chances of more rain returning soon. I wanted to give an informative video on Prevent Plant. If you can give me a few minutes, I'd like to talk with you with some of the very important decisions that you will need to be making if you can't get your crops planted timely. I'd like to start by saying that my knowledge and experience is what sets me apart from most agents. With that being said, I'd like to share some of that knowledge with you today to help you navigate Prevent Plant, if you choose to use it. Some folks have never used Prevent Plant. Maybe they don't even know what it is, so let me explain it. Basically, the insurance company will pay you a percentage of your guarantee if you meet the qualifications to not plant and let your ground remain idle. Corn is 55% of your coverage guarantee, popcorn if you plant it, and soybeans are 60% of your coverage guarantee. Then make sure you add 5% more if you have the PF option added to your policy. I'll mostly be discussing Prevent Plant field corn for Indiana. If anyone would like to know the dates and deadlines for other crops or states, feel free to reach out. I'd like to start by giving you the most important rule of mine when it comes to dealing with a wet spring. Here it is, Wagster rule number 1. Never certify your crops at FSA until you have an insurance plan worked out with your agent. So, how would you calculate a Prevent Plant payment to see what kind of guarantee or payment you might get? Well, regardless if you're an enterprise unit where all units come together for a loss, or optional unit where each section or square mile stands alone, Prevent Plant pays on each section or each square mile and only uses the spring price. So if the harvest price would increase in the fall, Prevent Plant would still be paid out on the spring price. So corn this year would be $4.66. So to calculate an estimated payment, you would take your approved average yield in each section. So $4.66 for corn, 0.2097 cents for popcorn if you grow it, and $11.55 for beans, times your coverage level of 55% corn, popcorn and soybeans are 60%, and make sure you add that 5%, like I said, for the PF option. Keep in mind that if you take Prevent Plant, you can make land improvements, or a cover crop can be planted and can be hayed, grazed, or cut for silage, haylage, or baleage at any time, which is different than in past years. So some good updates for that. Moving on to Wagster rule number 2. After June 5th, farmers will lose 1% per day of coverage up till June 25th for corn, which is a critical deadline, considering that Prevent Plant claims have to be turned in 72 hours after this date or by June 28th to be eligible for potential payment. With that being said, if you are prevented to planting corn and have made the decision to switch to beans, depending on what's been sprayed, instead of taking a Prevent Plant corn payment, this is where Wagster rule number 2 comes into play. Still request Prevent Plant corn claim to be turned in by your agent by June 28th. This way, if you're unable to plant the beans, you'll have Prevent Plant corn to fall back on, which usually would pay a higher payment than soybean Prevent Plant, depending on the APH per each section or your history. This is also important to remember. A Prevent Plant corn claim can always be withdrawn if you don't use it. However, once you certify Prevent Plant at the FSA office, you cannot change it. Remember Wagster rule number 1, never certify at the FSA office until you have a plan worked out with your insurance agent. Don't certify too early and shoot yourself in the foot, limiting your options. If you plant in Prevent Plant certified ground, there would be consequences, and this could hurt your APH and your payments. However, taking Prevent Plant will not hurt or help your APH in any other case. So, what are the qualifications for Prevent Plant? The first qualification is the infamous 2020 rule that comes up a lot with crop insurance rules. 20 acres or 20% of the unit cannot be planted. This is different than replant, where 20 acres or 20% needs to be replanted. So if you're an enterprise unit, you just need to have at least 20 acres per crop somewhere in that county designated for Prevent Plant. However, if you are optional unit, you have to meet that 2020 rule for each section or square mile. So basically, if you have a section that you haven't planted anything in, then you automatically qualify for this qualification. Second qualification, eligible acres. Your eligible acres are the highest amount of acres you planted in the last 4 years for each crop. Most of the companies I work with have reports that I could run to determine how many acres that would be available for each client if you don't know. You would also need to deduct how many acres you've already planted of that crop. This would equal how many eligible acres you would have for prevent plant for that crop. With that being said, if you do not have enough eligible corn acres, you can borrow from your bean acres, and those borrowed acres will be at the lesser of the corn or bean guarantee. And you also have to remember that's if you have a bean policy. So the third would be the common to the area. If you're the only one that took prevent plant for a specific crop, you are unlikely to be approved. Last qualification. A few years back, they added the 1 in 4 rule. To be eligible, the ground must be planted, harvested, and insured once in the last 4 crop years. A few other scenarios you could face. What about partial fields? For example, you planted a partial cornfield, then got rained out. Can you take prevent plant on the other half? The answer is yes, as long as you submitted a timely corn prevent plant claim and it's certified this as prevent plant at the FSA office, and you didn't plant yourself eligibility with the 2020 rule. Now, what about a split field? For example, half of a field was intended to corn, it got late, and so you switched to beans for the remaining half. A couple years ago, this was not allowed unless you had a history of splitting that field prior with both crops. Now, you may be eligible for a 100% prevent plant payment on corn. 1, if you have the history of planting both crops in the field in the same year, or 2, you can provide proof you intended to plant corn on the acreage, including but not limited to inputs purchased, applied, or available to apply, or that acreage was a part of a crop rotation. If you don't meet either of these criteria for corn, you may still be eligible for a prevent plant payment on soybeans if all other policy provisions are met. I know that was a lot of information, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to give me a call. Whenever you work with my agency or not, we can review anything you need to, so give me a ring. I hope this video has helped to make your best decision possible in this challenging spring. Take care.